Treaty with the Creeks, June 14, 1866. Treaty of Cession and Indemnity concluded at the City of Washington on 14th day of June in the year of our Lord 1866, by and between the United States, represented by Dennis M. Cooley, Commissioner of Indian Affairs, Elijah Sells, Superintendent of Indian Affairs for the Southern Superintendency, and Colonel Elias Parker, Special Commissioner on the Creek Nation of Indians, represented by O.K. Tarsars Harjo or Sands, Kawatomiko, and Chuche, delegates at large, and D.N. McIntosh and James Smith, special delegates of the Southern Creeks. Preamble. Whereas existing treaties between the U.S. and the Creek nations have become insufficient to meet their mutual necessities, and whereas the Creeks made a treaty with so-called Confederate States on the 10th of July, 1861, whereby they ignored their allegiance to the U.S. and unsettled the treaty relations existing between the Creeks and the U.S., and did so render themselves liable to forfeit to the U.S. all benefits and advantages enjoyed by them in lands, annuities, protection, and immunities, including their lands and other property held by grant or gift from the U.S., and whereas in view of said liabilities, the U.S. require of the Creeks a portion of their land whereon to settle other Indians, and whereas a treaty of peace and amity was entered into between the U.S. and Creeks and other tribes at Fort Smith, September 13, 1865, where the Creeks revoked, canceled, and repudiated the aforesaid treaty made with so-called Confederate States, and whereas the U.S., through its commissioners, in said treaty of peace and amity, promised to enter into treaty with the Creeks to arrange and settle all questions relating to and growing out of said treaty with so-called Confederate States. Now therefore the U.S., by its commissioners and the above-named delegates of the Creek Nation, day and year above mentioned, mutually stipulate and agree on behalf of the respective parties as follows, to wit. Article 1. There shall be perpetual peace and friendship between the parties to this treaty, and the Creeks bind themselves to remain firm allies and friends of the U.S., and never to take up arms against the U.S., but always faithfully to aid in putting down its enemies. They also agree to remain at peace with all other Indian tribes, and in return the U.S. guarantees them quiet possession of their country and protection against hostilities on the part of other tribes. In the event of hostilities, the U.S. agree that the tribe commencing and prosecuting the same shall, as far as may be practicable, make just reparation therefor. To ensure this protection, the Creeks agree to a military occupation of that country at any time by the U.S., and the U.S. agree to station and continue in said country from time to time at its own expense such force as may be necessary for that purpose. A general amnesty of all past offenses against the laws of the U.S. committed by any member of the Creek Nation is hereby declared. And the Creeks, anxious for the restoration of kind and friendly feelings among themselves, do hereby declare an amnesty for all past offenses against their government, and no Indian or Indians shall be prescribed, or any act of forfeiture or confiscation passed against those who have remained friendly to or taken up arms against the U.S., but they shall enjoy equal privileges with other members of said tribe, and all laws heretofore passed inconsistent herewith are hereby declared inoperative. Article 2. The Creeks hereby covenant and agree that henceforth neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, otherwise than in the punishment of crimes whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted in accordance with the laws applicable to all members of said tribe, shall ever exist in said nation. And inasmuch as there are among the Creeks many persons of African descent who have no interest in the soil, it is stipulated that hereafter these persons lawfully residing in said Creek country under their laws and usages, or who have been thus residing in said country and may return within 1 year from the ratification of this treaty, and their descendants and such others of the same race as may be permitted by the laws of the said nation to settle within the limits of the jurisdiction of the Creek Nation as citizens, shall have and enjoy all the rights and privileges of native citizens, including an equal interest in the soil and national funds, and the laws of the said nation shall be equally binding upon and give equal protection to all such persons and all other persons whatsoever race or color who may be adopted as citizens or members of said tribe. Article 3. In compliance with the desire of the U.S. to locate other Indians and freedmen thereon, the Creeks hereby cede and convey to the U.S. to be sold to and used as homes for such other civilized Indians as the U.S. may choose to settle thereon, the west half of their entire domain to be divided by a line running north and south, the eastern half of said Creek lands being retained by them, shall, except as herein otherwise stipulated, be forever set apart as a home for said Creek Nation, and in consideration of said cession of west half of their lands, estimated to contain 3,250,560 acres, the U.S. agreed to pay the sum of 30 cents per acre amounting to $975,168. In the manner hereinafter provided, to wit, $200,000 shall be paid per capita in money, unless otherwise directed by the President of the U.S. upon the ratification of this treaty, to enable the Creeks to occupy, restore, and improve their farms, and to make their nation independent and self-sustaining, and to pay the damages sustained by the mission schools on the North Fork and the Arkansas River not to exceed $2,000, and to pay the delegates such per diem as the agent and Creek Council may agree upon as a just and fair compensation, all which shall be distributed for that purpose by the agent with the advice of the Creek Council. Under the direction of the Secretary of Interior, $1,000 shall be paid in money and divided to soldiers that enlist in the Federal Army and the loyal refuge Indians and freedmen who were driven from their homes by rebel forces, to reimburse them in proportion to their respective losses. $400,000 be paid in money and divided per capita to said Creek Nation, unless otherwise directed by the President of the United States under the direction of the Secretary of Interior, as the same may accrue from the sale of land to other Indians. The U.S. agreed to pay to said Indians in such manner and for such purposes as the Secretary of Interior may direct, interest at the rate of 5% per annum from the date of the ratification of this treaty, on the amount hereinbefore agreed upon for said ceded lands, after deducting the said $200,000. The residue, $275,168, shall remain in the Treasury of the U.S., and the interest thereon at the rate of 5% per annum be annually paid to said Creeks as above stipulated. Article 4. Immediately after the ratification of this treaty, the U.S. agreed to ascertain the amount due the respective soldiers who enlisted in the Federal Army, loyal refugee Indians and freedmen, in portion to their several losses, and to pay the amount awarded each in the following manner, to wit: a census of the Creeks shall be taken by the agent of the U.S. for said nation, under the direction of the Secretary of Interior, and a roll of the names of soldiers that enlist in the Federal Army, loyal refugee Indians and freedmen, be made by him. The Superintendent of Indian Affairs for the Southern Superintendency and the agent of the U.S. for the Creek Nation shall provide to investigate and determine from said roll the amounts due the respective refugee Indians, and shall transmit to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs for his approval, and that of the Secretary of Interior, their awards together with the reasons thereof. In case the awards so made shall be duly approved, said awards shall be paid from the proceeds of the sale of said lands within 1 year from the ratification of this treaty, or so soon as said amount of $100,000 can be raised from sale of said lands to other Indians. Article 5. The Creek Nation hereby grant a right-of-way through their lands to the Choctaw and Chickasaw country to any company which shall be duly authorized by Congress, and shall, with the express consent and approbation of the Secretary of Interior, undertake to construct a railroad from any point north to any point in or south of Creek country, and likewise from any point on their eastern to their western or southern boundary. The said railroad company, together with all its agents and employees, shall be subject to the laws of the U.S. relating to intercourse with Indian tribes, and also to such rules and regulations as may be prescribed by the Secretary of Interior for that purpose, and the Creeks agreed to sell to the U.S. or any company duly authorized as aforesaid such lands not legally owned or occupied by a member or members of the Creek Nation, lying along the line of said contemplated railroad, not exceeding on each side thereof a belt or strip of land 3 miles in width, at such price per acre as may be eventually agreed upon between said Creek Nation and the party or parties building said road, subject to the approval of the President of the United States. Provided, however, that said land thus sold shall not be reconveyed, leased, or rented to, or be occupied by anyone not a citizen of the Creek Nation, according to its laws and recognized usages. Provided also that officers, servants, and employees of said railroad necessary to its construction and management shall not be excluded from such necessary occupancy. That they, being subject to the provisions of Indian intercourse law and such rules and regulations as may be established by the Secretary of Interior, nor shall any conveyance of any of said lands be made to the party building and managing said road until its completion as a first-class railroad, and its acceptance as such by the Secretary of Interior. Article 6. Stricken out. Article 7. The Creeks hereby agree that the Seminole tribe of Indians may sell and convey to the U.S. all or any portion of Seminole lands upon such terms as may be mutually agreed upon by and between the Seminoles and the U.S. Article 8. It is agreed that the Secretary of Interior forthwith cause the line dividing the Creek country as provided for by the terms of the sale of Creek lands to the U.S. in Article 3 of this treaty to be accurately surveyed, under the direction of Commissioner of Indian Affairs, expenses of which survey shall be paid by the U.S. Article 9. Inasmuch as the agency buildings of the Creek Tribe have been destroyed during the late war, it is further agreed that the U.S. shall, at their own expense not exceeding $10,000, cause to be erected suitable agency buildings, the sites whereof shall be selected by the agent of said tribe in the reduced Creek Reservation under the direction of the Superintendent of Indian Affairs. In consideration whereof the Creeks hereby cede and relinquish to the U.S. one section of their lands to be designated and selected by their agent under the direction of the Superintendent of Indian Affairs, upon which said agency buildings shall be erected, which section of land shall revert to Creek Nation when said agency buildings are no longer used by the U.S. upon said nation paying a fair and reasonable value for said building vacated. Article 10. The Creeks agree to such legislation as Congress and the President of the U.S. may deem necessary for the better administration of justice and the protection of the rights of person and property within Indian Territory. Provided, however, that said legislation shall not in any manner interfere with or annul their present tribal organizations, rights, laws, privileges, and customs, the Creeks also agree that a general council consisting of delegates elected by each nation or tribe lawfully resident within Indian Territory may be annually convened in said territory, which council shall be organized in such manner and possess such powers as are hereinafter described. First, after the ratification of this treaty, and as soon as may be deemed practicable by the Secretary of Interior, and prior to the first session of said council, a census or enumeration of each tribe lawfully resident in said territory shall be taken under the direction of the Superintendent of Indian Affairs, who for that purpose is hereby authorized to designate and appoint competent persons whose compensation shall be fixed by the Secretary of Interior and paid by the U.S. Second, the first General Council shall consist of one member from each tribe, an additional member from each 1,000 Indians, or each faction of 1,000 greater than 500, being members of any tribe lawfully resident in said territory, and shall be selected by said tribes respectively, who may assent to the establishment of said General Council, and if none should be thus formally selected by any nation or tribe, the said nation or tribe shall be represented in said General Council by the chief or chiefs and headmen of said tribe, to be taken in the order of their rank as recognized in tribal usage in the same number and proportion as above indicated. After the said census shall have been taken and completed, the Superintendent of Indian Affairs shall publish and declare to each tribe the number of members of said council to which they shall be entitled under the provisions of this article, and the persons entitled to so represent said tribes shall meet at such time and place as he shall appoint, but thereafter the time and place of the sessions of said council shall be determined by its action, provided that no session in any 1 year shall exceed the term of 30 days, and provided that special session of said council may be called whenever, in the judgment of the Secretary of Interior, the interest of said tribe shall require. Third, said General Council shall have power to legislate upon all rightful subjects and matters pertaining to the intercourse and relations of Indian tribes and nations resident in said territory, the arrest and extradition of criminals and offenders escaping from one tribe to another, the administration of justice between members of several tribes of said territory, and persons other than Indians, members of said tribes or nations, the construction of works of internal improvement, and the common defense and safety of the nations of said territory. All laws enacted by said General Council shall take effect at such time as may therein be provided, unless suspended by direction of Secretary of Interior or the President of the U.S. No law shall be enacted inconsistent with the Constitution of the U.S. or the laws of Congress or existing treaty stipulations with the U.S., nor shall said council legislate upon matters pertaining to the organization, laws, or customs of the several tribes, except as herein provided for. Fourth, said council shall be presided over by the Superintendent of Indian Affairs, or in case of his absence from any cause, the duties of said superintendent enumerated in this article shall be performed by such person as the Secretary of Interior may direct. Fifth, the Secretary of Interior shall appoint a secretary of said council, whose duty it shall be to keep an accurate record of all the proceedings of said council, and who shall transmit a true copy of all such proceedings duly certified by the Superintendent of Indian Affairs to the Secretary of Interior immediately after the sessions of said council shall terminate. He shall be paid out of the Treasury of the U.S. an annual salary of $500. 6. The members of said council shall be paid by the U.S. the sum of $4 per diem during the time actually in attendance on the sessions of said council, and at the rate of $4 for every 20 miles necessarily traveled by them in going to and returning to the homes respectively from said council, to be certified by the Secretary of said council, Superintendent of Indian Affairs. 7. The Creeks also agree that a court of or courts may be established in said territory with such jurisdiction and organized in such manner as Congress may by law provide. Article 11. The stipulations of this treaty are to be a full settlement of all claims of said Creek Nation for damages and losses of every kind growing out of the late rebellion, and all expenditures by the U.S. of annuities and clothing and feeding refugee and destitute Indians, since the diversion of annuities for that purpose consequent upon the late war with so-called Confederate States, and the Creeks hereby ratify and confirm all such diversions of annuities heretofore made from the funds of the Creek Nation by the U.S., and the U.S. agree that no annuities shall be diverted from the objects for which they were originally devoted by treaty stipulations of the Creeks to the use of refugee and destitute Indians other than the Creeks or members of Creek Nation after the close of the present fiscal year, June 30th, 1866. Article 12. The U.S. reaffirms and resumes all obligations of treaty stipulations of the Creek Nation entered into before the Treaty of said Creek Nation with the so-called Confederate States of July 10, 1861, not inconsistent herewith, and further agree to renew all payments accruing by force of said treaty stipulations from and after the close of the present fiscal year, June 30th, 1866, except as is provided in Article 11. Article 13. A quantity of land not exceeding 160 acres to be selected according to legal subdivision in one body and to include their improvements is hereby granted to every religious society or denomination which has erected or which with consent of Indians may hereafter erect buildings within the Creek country for missionary or educational purposes, but no land thus granted nor the buildings which have been or may be erected thereon shall ever be sold or otherwise disposed of, except with the consent and approval of the Secretary of Interior, and whenever any such lands or buildings shall be sold or disposed of, the proceeds thereof shall be applied under the direction of the Secretary of Interior to the support and maintenance of other similar establishments for the benefit of the Creeks and such other persons as may be or may hereafter become members of the tribe according to its laws, customs, and usages, and if at any time said improvements shall be abandoned for 1 year for missionary or educational purposes, all the rights herein granted for missionary and educational purposes shall revert to the said Creek Nation. Article 14. It is further agreed that all treaties heretofore entered into between the U.S. and the Creek Nation which are inconsistent with any of the articles or provisions of this treaty shall be, and are hereby rescinded and annulled, and it is further agreed that $10,000 shall be paid by the U.S. or so much thereof as may be necessary to pay the expenses incurred in negotiating the foregoing treaty. In testimony whereof, we the commissioners representing the U.S. and the delegates representing the Creek Nation have hereunto set our hands and seals at the place and on the day and year above written. Ian Cooley, Commissioner Indian Affairs, Elijah Sells, Superintendent Indian Affairs, Oktahas Harjo, his ex-mark, Kalmiko, his ex-mark, Kachoche, his ex-mark, Dean McIntosh, James M.C. Smith, in the presence of J.W. Dunn, U.S. Indian Agent, J. Harlan, U.S. Indian Agent, Charles E. Mix, G.M. Tibbetts, George A. Reynolds, U.S. Indian Agent, John B. Sanborn, John F. Brown, Seminole Delegate, John Chipko, his ex-mark, Foss Harjo, his ex-mark, Chokot Huga, his ex-mark, R. Fields, Cherokee Delegate, Douglas H. Cooper, William Penn Adair, Harry Island, his ex-mark, U.S. Interpreter, Creek Nation, Saludin Wati.